Hello, my name is Christopher Renstrom. I'm the creator of rulingplanets.com and Christopher Renstrom Astrology. And this time, I wanted to talk to you about Neptune entering the zodiac sign of Aries on March 30th. Neptune is one of the three modern planets in astrology. The three modern planets were the planets that were discovered in what we call the modern age. These planets are Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Uranus was discovered in the year 1781, Neptune was discovered in the year 1846, and Pluto was discovered in the year 1930. The modern planets are often called the transpersonal planets because they're seen as generating a very powerful energy, an energy that can be even more powerful than the traditional, or what are called the personal planets themselves. This is because the modern planets each take such a very long time to go through one zodiac sign. When you remember that the sun will go through all 12 signs of the zodiac in just 1 year, think for a moment of what it must be like to have Uranus traveling through one zodiac sign for 7 years, Neptune traveling through one zodiac sign for 14 years, and Pluto, because its orbit is elliptical, can spend anywhere from 12 to 32 years in just one zodiac sign. Basically, you want to sort of think of the modern planets as representing realms unto themselves. Uranus is associated with the starry night. That's because it's named after the Greek god Ouranos, which meant father sky or vault of heaven or starry night. So when you look up at the stars at night, you can think of Uranus. Uranus was such a powerful idea, this idea of the heavenly father, that Uranus in Greek religion didn't have a statue. It didn't have a temple. It wasn't pictured as a deity at all, simply because people went out and looked at the starry night and there it was. I mean, the immensity and the majesty spoke for itself. Neptune was named after the Roman god of the seas, the oceans. In Greek religion and mythology, he was known as Poseidon. And again, when you go and look at an ocean, maybe from the beach or maybe on a boat, it's immense, it's vast, it stretches out in all directions. It's not something that's easily framed or encapsulated. So the ocean, which covers 3/4 of this planet, the ocean was also regarded as a realm entirely unto itself, a realm that really went beyond mankind's grasp to understand it. And finally, Pluto was given the realm of the underworld, that place beneath the earth. But the underworld, although it was ruled over everything that was buried beneath the earth, was also a realm of itself, the realm of hell, the realm where souls went to at the end of their days. And it was decided whether these souls would either spend the rest of eternity in the Elysian fields, which is an area of bliss and celebration and peace, or whether they would spend eternity thrown into the belching bowels of Tartarus. So Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto each ruled over these tremendous realms. And so when we think of these planets, we think of their majesty, we think of their immensity, and we think of their unfathomable power. Now, Neptune, in my opinion, is the most difficult planet to explain or even describe in astrology. That's because Neptune, when you read about it in an astrological book, is always associated with illusion and disillusionment. It's associated with mirages, with things that aren't really there, that there's something about them that is ethereal or mystic. And so when you begin sort of talking about Neptune, things sort of become vague or metaphysical or kind of philosophical, or maybe you just fall silent because you're struck by the majesty of mystery. I mean, Neptune really eludes our ability to define and even interpret it. So when I began working with Neptune, I usually would say, oh, it's illusion and disillusionment or something along those lines. And sure enough, during a reading, if someone had very strong Neptune and you're talking about illusion and disillusionment, you kind of became kind of depressed about it. Or does that mean I'm going to be, the other things that were associated with Neptune, like an alcoholic or a drug addict or even a depressive? Neptune for a very long time did not have a lot of positive things going for it. And that's because Neptune really insists that we step out of the realm of keywords, that we leave the safe shores of definitions, and that we plumb into its depths, that we go on an adventure into understanding Neptune and what it really stands for. There are certain things that are pretty traditional in the understanding of Neptune, things like symbolism, the realm of the symbolic. I often will associate Neptune to Carl Jung's collective unconscious, the idea that there's this realm of archetypes that we can access through our unconscious, whether it's through dream or dream work, or through therapy, or through some sort of reflection. Or in the case where Carl Jung first engaged archetypes, I think it was working with patients who were having psychotic breakdowns in which they were trying to describe their experience through symbols. And that's when Carl Jung began to see that these symbols weren't just random, that these symbols sort of referred to older symbols, maybe in religion or in myth, that there were certain symbols or motifs that would show up in different cultures that the patients that he was working with had never even come into contact with. I mean, that's what really got Carl Jung thinking beyond just the symbolic of our everyday life, but into the symbolic of the collective unconscious, this place in which all streams and rivers feed into this vast ocean of the unconscious that all of us on the planet are connected to. I know that the American psychologist William James absolutely connected these mystical experiences to having their sources in different religious beliefs. And William James really advocated for the mystical experience being a genuine experience of itself, that it wasn't something that was neurotic or crazy or anything along those lines. So these were the first people who were trying to describe Neptune and the way that it works in astrology. As a planet, I think influence is a really good word for Neptune, that we fall under the influence. I mean, think of that phrase, under the influence. It kind of refers to maybe someone who is under the influence of drugs or under the influence of alcohol or under the influence of something that's going on in their mind that might be a little bit crazed. And of course, in the 1970s, we had a phrase, which was, what was it? Someone must have put something in the water, I think was the phrase that was in the 1970s, a time when I was growing up, all right? So someone must have put something in the water. It was this idea that maybe LSD had been put in the water, or prescription drugs had been put in the water, or something along these lines, that when you drank from it, you were under the influence of what had been put into the water. But this idea of there's something in the water meant more than, drug-laced pipes or something along those lines. What the notion or the idea of something must be in the water referred to was all of a sudden there was a kind of fad or a craze that would go through society. Everyone suddenly became obsessed with this idea. If you think back in history a couple of centuries, the tulip craze, when all of a sudden, tulips were seen as the most valuable thing, and people were buying and selling tulips and driving up the price of tulips and things along those lines. So there's an example. All of a sudden, this object or this symbol captures the fascination of everyone, and then the value of it goes up. It's something that we're used to with a hit song or a hit series. All of a sudden, it's in everyone's minds. So Zeitgeist is probably a really good word to use with Neptune as well, when it's passing through a zodiac sign. Zeitgeist is a word that talks about the spirit of the time, that all of a sudden, there's this spirit of the time that begins to affect people's beliefs or their ideas, their invention, their fantasy, their imagination, and it takes hold for a while, and then it lets go of its hold, and the zeitgeist moves on to something else. That's the way that I would recommend thinking of Neptune as it transits a zodiac sign, that it becomes the zeitgeist, that it enters a zodiac sign and it begins to sort of infuse that sign with a mystical aura, with a mirage aura, with a beckoning aura. Remember that Neptune is associated to yearning and longing for things we can never have, for experiences that are inexplicable and ineffable. So when Neptune enters the zodiac sign, it illuminates that sign with its energy, and all of a sudden aspects of that sign start appearing in the zeitgeist, that people aspire or long for or want to be, things that are associated with that zodiac sign. So let's talk a little bit about Aries. What about Aries might become glamorized? Well, Aries is a zodiac sign that is fiercely individualistic. Aries believes in being an individual, all right, that it has independence. It must have independence, and it has independent beliefs and independent actions, and it is true only to itself. These would be attributes that are associated with Aries. Some of this you get from the element that Aries is associated with, which is fire, okay? And so there's the fiery temperament and the burning desire and the burning passions. Fire is also associated to the spirit in astrology. So that excitability, that spiritedness are going to be qualities that are going to show up when Aries, and there are going to be qualities that are going to become seen as attractive or alluring with Neptune moving through the zodiac sign. So there may be this feeling of that's what I think and deal with it, or these are my beliefs and I don't care what you think, I'm going to hold them fiercely. You can't talk me out of this, or you can't tell me what to do. I'm my own man, or I'm my own woman, I'm my own person. These are things that are going to be associated to Aries, and these are things that are going to be glamorized, maybe even mythologized, while Neptune is moving through the zodiac sign of Aries. And Neptune, by the way, will be in Aries from 2025 until 2038. These are some ideas that we can start off with. What I would also add to it is new beginnings. Maybe Neptune in Aries might bring this idea of a fresh future. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac and was associated with being the first sign of the agricultural year. It's the zodiac sign that's associated to the spring equinox. So new starts and new beginnings are associated with Aries because one year has come to an end and a new year is beginning. So we might almost think of Neptune in Aries as representing a fresh future. The other thing that I want to add is urgency. Aries is a zodiac sign that comes first. And this is something that people sort of mistake. They kind of think Aries comes first because it's pushy and it's full of itself and all these sorts of things. Aries comes first, has to come first, because there is an urgency that is connected to the zodiac sign of Aries. And that's because of its association with the spring equinox here in the Northern Hemisphere. So with the spring equinox, with life beginning, if you go out and look at your garden or just on a daily walk, plants and trees and things like that, just the first hint of spring gets plants beginning to bud, okay? Gets plants pushing up through the soil, gets seeds beginning to sprout. And there is an urgency not only to grow, but to take as much ground as you possibly can in the springtime, because flowers aren't the only things that are sprouting or beginning to emerge from the ground. There are weeds as well. And so weeds threaten to choke the life out of flowers, or there may be frosts that might suddenly descend and kill whatever was starting to bloom or whatever was starting to bud. So this idea of urgency, of taking as much ground as you can because you don't know how much time you have to take it, is going to be very much associated with Aries. And this may be also something that we could look for as hints of Neptune traveling through the zodiac sign of Aries. Now, Aries is ruled by the planet Mars, and Mars is named after the Roman god of war. So Aries is associated to conflict, and Aries is associated to fighting. Aries is all about the struggle. If Aries sees a challenge or an obstacle, it doesn't, wring its hands and worry or give up and walk in the opposite direction. Aries takes it on, okay? And like the ram, it takes it on, head first. So Aries rises to a challenge. It rises to the occasion of itself. It doesn't walk away from a fight. And so Aries is drawn to friction. It's drawn to conflict. And another thing that Aries is going to be drawn to because of its ruling planet Mars is crisis. Okay, so a crisis is a conflict. It could be a crisis within yourself, a conflict within yourself, but a crisis can also describe a period of time when important decisions have to be made, when crucial decisions have to be made. And again, this stems from this urgency that is connected to life beginning at the spring equinox. So in a way, we can say that Neptune in Aries glamorizes the idea of the good fight. Now, when I think of the good fight, and when I think of Aries, well, I often think of the opening lines of the Declaration of Independence here in the United States that was drafted on July 4th, 1776. The Declaration of Independence, the lines are pretty famous. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These were extraordinary words coming out of the American colonies. These were fighting words as far as the British Empire was concerned, coming out of the American colonies. Okay, and they were penned by Thomas Jefferson, who himself was an Aries. He was even redheaded. Remember that Mars is the red planet. And his birth date was April 13th, 1743. So this idea of we hold truths to be self-evident, you can hear the Aries in that. It's obvious, you can see these truths are self-evident. It's obvious. Anyone knows that everyone's created equal. Okay, so this was, we're not going to have a leader. We're not going to be held down by a tyrant. Okay, and that not only are we created equal, but we are endowed by God with certain unalienable rights, rights that cannot be separated from anyone who's born onto this planet. And that is life. Everyone has the right to life. Everyone has the right to liberty. And everyone has the right to pursue their happiness. But lines that are often forgotten or overlooked are the lines that follow the opening lines in the Declaration of Independence. And Jefferson goes on to say that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is of the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. In other words, and you can hear the Mars in this, what's being said is that governments are created by people. They only exist by the consent of people to be ruled by the government. But as soon as a government starts becoming destructive, it is the right of the people to alter it, and if the government is still not responsive to it, to abolish it, to get rid of the government and to institute a new one. So, this is so revolutionary. It was revolutionary enough to say all men are created equal, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, okay? Because for people in society back in 1776, particularly in Europe, you had a class society, and if you were beneath a certain class, you just didn't, exist as a person. So that's revolutionary enough. But then to say a government exists only by the consent, okay, no king, no ruler, the government exists by the consent, and as soon as that government starts becoming destructive, you can alter it, you can change it. But if it gets really destructive, you can abolish it. You can get rid of it, and you can go ahead and replace it with a government that is more in keeping with the people themselves. So again, I want you to keep in mind this idea of the good fight. Thomas Jefferson, born April 13th, 1743, is throwing down the gauntlet. He's throwing down the glove to fight the good fight. And these become the founding principles, the opening words of the United States of America. So Neptune in Aries will glamorize those aspects of Aries. And so we're going with this idea of Neptune is going to glamorize the good fight. What is a good fight? Okay, on one hand, someone could say, like, that was a great boxing match, man. They really went at it. They went at it several rounds and things like that. It was great. Okay, that could be like a good fight in the sense that it was entertaining and blood was spilled and, all these sorts of things. But more often than not, a good fight means a righteous fight. Okay, the good fight. It's a righteous fight. The fight is just. There's moral good to it. I didn't want to engage in this fight, but I'm going to fight the good fight. I'm going to struggle. I'm going to throw myself into some sort of resistance or revolt, to fight the good fight because something is oppressing, something is tyrannizing, something is trying to press its foot down on my throat. And so this becomes the good fight. It's a righteous fight. Now, astrologers, as you know, spend a lot of time in the future. We, try to sort of forecast what's going to be up and coming. And a lot of people regard astrologers as basically being future-oriented, and that's all they really think about. Astrologers spend just as much time, if not more time, in the past. And the reason why we spend so much time in the past is because the planets in their orbits repeat the motion through the heavens. So we might want to go and look at, the last time when, Mars was in Cancer and what was going on. The last time Jupiter was in Aries and what was going on. You can do that with your own chart. But with the modern planets, you really want to ask, well, when was the last time Neptune was in Aries? All right. Remember, Neptune spends 14 years in each zodiac sign. So that's 140 plus whatever, 168-ish years going through all 12 signs of the zodiac. Okay, so what we want to do is go back in time, that 160 plus years, and look at the last time that Neptune entered the zodiac sign of Aries. Okay, we know that this time Neptune enters the zodiac sign of Aries on March 30th. So when was the last time that Neptune entered the zodiac sign of Aries, and does it have something to say to us today? Well, the last time that Neptune entered the zodiac sign of Aries was on April 13th, 1861. That happens to be the day after the beginning of the American Civil War, which began on April 12th, 1861. That's when the Confederate Army first fired on Fort Sumter, and that was the beginning of the American Civil War. What's also interesting about April 13th, 1861, is that you might remember that April 13th happens to be the birthday of Thomas Jefferson. So, this Civil War, what was the Civil War fought over? Well, we all know the Civil War was fought over slavery. Okay, now people can say, well, it was slavery, but it was also states' rights, and it was also about, and it was all those things. But honestly, what it gets down to is slavery. All right. And so what the Civil War showed was things reaching a boil, the tensions and the strife and the struggle, who owned slaves, who didn't own slaves, abolitionists saying, there should be no slavery. This had caused a crisis. This had caused a crisis that had boiled up into the day-to-day life of the United States of America. So there was a moral crisis that we were thrown into. Remember, crisis is ruled by Mars. And so whenever you're dealing with issues of the spiritual life or the moral life, you're talking about the element of fire. Okay, so there was a moral crisis that we experience with the beginning of the American Civil War. And the crisis is, what is a man? All right. Nowadays, we would say, what is a person? And what we have to remember back in 1861 is Black Americans were enslaved in this country. Not everywhere, but in the southern states they were. And they were the basis of the wealth of the southern states. They were able to manufacture and farm to the point of profitability that they were able to do because it was unpaid labor. It was slave labor. Okay, so the first crisis is, what is a person? Okay, and famously, slaves were regarded as property until it came to the formation of the Electoral College, and the southern colonies needed more votes than the people who could vote. And so it was regarded that slaves were 3/4 of a person, or 3/5 of a person, I think, 3/5 of a person. So slaves weren't people, they were property. So there was this moral crisis. What is a human being? What is a man? And you can already hear, the Aries coming through here, the fiercely individualistic. Every single person is an individual. Every single person, has a right to be free and to be independent and to live their own lives. This is an Aries credo, and we see it reflected in the Declaration of Independence. And this was an enormous fallacy. So here it finally comes to a head on April 12th, 1861, with the beginning of the American Civil War. We're going to fight over slavery. So there's this crisis of what is a person, and people are not property. It's wrong for someone else to enslave another person. But this was not the only crisis that was coming to a head at this period of time. There was also a Christian crisis that was being experienced in the United States of America at this period of time. And this came from abolitionists. Abolitionists were different Christians who had banded together to say that slavery was wrong, it was vile, and that we needed to stop slavery, period. It's a horrible evil that is poisoning American society. Even though evangelicals historically get the credit for being the first abolitionists, the real first abolitionists were the Quakers. And Quakers were a very particularly interesting, fascinating aspect of Christianity. And the Quakers believed that we were all made in the image of God. That's in the Bible. But they imagined being made in the image of God as carrying within us a divine light. Okay, that God was light, and that each of us carried within us a divine light. And they were called Quakers because whenever they felt inspired, maybe at a meeting of a particular Quaker community, if someone began to tremble, it was this sense that they were being inhabited or influenced by the divine Holy Spirit of God. So they would quake, and that was hence the name Quakers. So the Quakers said that basically, if we're all made in the image of God and we all carry this divine light within us, how can you treat a slave as not human? Okay, everyone is made in the image of God. And this insistence on an individual experience of God, which the Quakers held very powerfully to themselves. You could be in a group, but you were your own individual expression of God. Again, you can hear the Aries there, okay, led Quakers to have no ministers, no priests, no people telling them what to think, that the whole community would come together and each individual would speak. Each individual was equal, okay, in their experience of God and in what they had to say about God. So this Christian crisis between Christians in the North, or the abolitionists, not all Christians in the North subscribe to abolition, but let's call them abolitionists, insisting that to own a slave was satanic, it was evil, it was unchristian. And then there were those Christians in the southern states who were saying, you're crazy, slavery is talked about in the Bible all the time, and we have we take good care of our slaves, and don't tell us, how to believe in our God, So this was an enormous Christian crisis that was coming to a boil with the outbreak of the American Civil War. And then there was a third crisis that was taking place. And it's kind of what I would call an existential crisis. It was the great question, is there a God? Okay, now, where's that one coming from? Well, in January 1860, which is 1 year, okay, and a couple of months before Neptune enters Aries, Charles Darwin's Origin of the Species was first published in the United States of America. And the Origin of the Species basically talks about an unfolding and an ongoing evolution of the species, where different varieties of species intermix with one another. It's often understood as sort of a survival of the fittest. The species that survive are the ones that are fittest and the most strong, the most dominant. And that's not what Charles Darwin was talking about. Charles Darwin was saying that a success of a species in survival was its adaptability, okay, but also its being able to experience variations in itself. The foundation of a survival of a species was based on its diversity, okay, that you didn't have one pure species that was going to survive. If anything, a species that didn't variate was pretty much going to be bound for extinction. It was a species that experienced diversity, that experienced different variations in it and created new species. These were the species that were going to survive and thrive and then continue this ongoing process of evolution. But Darwin went a step further. He said that man was descended from one source, okay, that you had different types of people in the world who have different societies and cultures and things like that. You have different types of people, but they came from one source. And that source was not Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. That source were apes. Man was descended from apes. Well, there were a lot of things going on in the American consciousness in 1861 when The Origin of the Species came out. But gradually, over a period of time, it began to take hold and it became an affront. What, we're descended from an ape? No, we're descended from Adam and Eve, and we're made in the image of God, and God looks like a human being. All of this was being debunked, thrown into crisis at the time that Neptune was entering the zodiac sign of Aries. And this would go on to have enormous implications. People are still debating what went down with the Civil War to this day. People are still debating what it is to be a true Christian. People are still debating whether the origin of the species is a theory and it shouldn't be taught in school at all. It's just a theory. Or maybe we should also have intelligent design taught in the schools, religion versus science. All of this originates on April 13th, 1861, when Neptune enters the zodiac sign of Aries. Now remember that Neptune spends 14 years in a zodiac sign. So Neptune was in Aries from 1861 until 1875. Following the Civil War, which was a very critical event in the United States of America, it was something that was just as powerful, just as significant as the original war for independence, what we call the Revolutionary War. Following the Civil War was a period of time that was called the Reconstruction. And this was a period of time in which people really felt like there was a fresh future, that they had gotten rid of the original sin of slavery and that they were now embracing a fresh future where each person could be equal, where each person could go forward. Now, different people had different ideas of what equality was going to be, as well as life, love, and the pursuit of happiness. During this period of time, the United States economy grew at its fastest rate in history, with real wages, wealth, and GDP increasing rapidly. The output of wheat, corn, coal, and railway track all increased significantly. Technologically speaking, we have the invention of the phonograph, the telephone, and the electric light bulb. As far as social change, the Second Industrial Revolution takes place during this time, and it moves people from the farms to the cities, making the cities much more populous than they were before. Women's activism reached its peak during the Civil War and Reconstruction period. When the Declaration of Independence was first drafted, it was Abigail Adams, the wife of John Adams, one of the original framers of the Declaration of Independence, who told her husband, "Don't forget the ladies." In other words, when you're saying all men are created equal, she was saying, don't forget the ladies. The ladies are created equal as well. And of course, that was ignored. Nevertheless, it's during this period of time that Neptune is in Aries that you have Victoria Claflin Woodhull, an American leader of the women's suffrage movement. She becomes the first woman to run for president of the United States in the 1872 election. Remember that Neptune is in Aries from 1861 until 1875. You have also during this period of time a large-scale immigration, which created a great deal of social tension, but also produced a new vitality in cities and states. And finally, you have the 15th Amendment to the United States Constitution, which is ratified in 1870. The 15th Amendment granted Black American men the right to vote. Hiram Revels and Joseph Rainey were the first Black Americans to serve in Congress in 1870. Revels was elected to the Senate, and Rainey was elected to the House. More than a dozen Black American men were elected to Congress during this period, and of course, they were all Republicans. This came to an end in 1876 with the election of Rutherford B. Hayes. This is when Reconstruction came to an end, and Jim Crow laws were introduced into the American South. Now, as I mentioned before, Neptune enters the zodiac sign of Aries on March 30th, 2025, and Neptune will be in the zodiac sign of Aries for 14 years. Now, that's a long time that Neptune is a planet, so you can't really do forecasts based on that. But what I wanted to do was go through the 12 signs anyway, and I wanted to sort of introduce ideas, themes really, to maybe look to see what unfolds over the next 14 years for each of the zodiac signs. So this isn't really forecasting, this is more kind of ideas, something to keep in mind in the back of the head over the next 14 years. If you're born under Aries, or you have Aries rising, I see Neptune in Aries as being a call to be a better person. And when I think of that, I can't help but think of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. King Arthur is a mythical Briton prince who pulls a sword from a stone and becomes recognized as the divine king of the British people. Well, he gathers around him the Knights of the Round Table, in which each of these knights had equal say, each of these knights had equal rank with one another, and they were both the guardians of King Arthur, and they were the confidantes to King Arthur. Every year, they would come back to Camelot, and they would take the Pentecostal oath. And the Pentecostal oath was done in the same spirit as the original 12 apostles who experienced the Pentecost. They came together in a room, and they experienced the Holy Spirit for themselves, with tongues of flame flickering over their heads, and where they were charged with the mission to go out into the world and to preach the word of Christ. The knights would regather in Camelot, and they would renew their oath. They would renew their vow to the king. And the oath was basically this code of honor that they would pledge. And so this was them reaffirming their vows to the king and reaffirming their vows to the community. The first vow was never to commit outrage or murder. So knights, which had a reputation before Arthur as being thugs, brigands, people on horseback who would go and rob people and kill them, without even a second thought, King Arthur brought this ennobling factor to being a knight. Before King Arthur, knights were thugs. After King Arthur, they were of noble spirit. They were more heroic in their stature and their ethos. So the first oath to renew as a pledge was never to commit outrage or murder, which is interesting because knights were going to be in battle and things like that. There was a difference between a battle and a murder. So you don't commit outrage, you don't harm people, you don't murder someone. You have swords and you have weapons, but you don't murder or kill without justification. To always flee treason. In other words, to always tell the truth and to never be treasonous, to someone. If you had differences or anger at someone, maybe you took it out in fisticuffs or some sort of battle, but you didn't go and betray them behind their back. The third one was to always give mercy to those who asked for mercy. And this was very important because in the heat of battle, when you're cleaving through people with swords, if someone all of a sudden falls on their knees and asks for mercy, and in ancient Greece, they would fall on the knee and then they would put their hand under the throat of the mighty soldier to get their attention, to ask for mercy. So they were bending the knee and then putting a hand under the throat. The knight didn't respond by decapitating the person. The knight, came out of the fury. They came out of the anger. They recollected themselves. And so if someone asked for mercy, even if this was someone who was bent on killing you just moments before, you gave them mercy. So you can see how Arthur was ennobling the forces of force around him. Knights were also told to always help ladies or damsels in distress, widows, women who were thrown on hard times. So you helped women, you didn't rape them. In fact, in Arthur's court, if you raped a woman, you were immediately put to death. Okay, so this is a big deal. Men can't just have their way with women anymore. If you were a knight, you helped women, you didn't abuse them. The other oath was to always protect the weak and the defenseless. Okay, so the weak and the defenseless mattered. All right, you didn't just treat them like crap or, who cares about you? You've got no power, you've got no value. You actually helped the weak and the defenseless. You flew to their aid as a knight. You defended them, you helped them out. And finally, the last oath was that no man should take up in battle in a wrongful quarrel, not for love and not for any worldly goods. So in other words, you couldn't, call someone down to, out of love. That was not a reason for battle. For worldly goods, you couldn't be a mercenary. You couldn't be knight for hire. You couldn't take money or bribes to go and kill someone or be in someone else's army. That you had to be loyal to the king and you had to be loyal to these pledges. So all the knights of the Round Table, both young and old, swore to uphold this oath. Every year, at the high feast of Pentecost, they renewed their oath, all right? So there was always this coming back together. There was always this communion which held the knights together, and they were bound to one another through loyalty to this oath. This oath made them all loyal to one another. Now, knights would go on quests, and they would face dilemmas. There are lots of stories of the different knights like Sir Gawain and Lancelot and Tristan and Parsifal who go on these quests and face dilemmas, and they're not always successful. Okay, but what's important here is that the knight's quest, the knight's adventure, the knight's challenge mirrored the quests that we go on in our own lives. Okay, so just as a knight goes out to find the Holy Grail or to defend a maiden, we have these same things that we do in our own lives, and we face the dilemmas and the predicaments in the same ways that the knights did. So what this charge to Aries during this period of time that Neptune is going through your sign is to abide by a higher code, to abide by a higher code of honor, one that restrains your lower impulses in nature, your more selfish or thoughtless impulses in nature, and then transmutes it to something that's higher, that puts you into service, not for those who can afford to pay you, but for those who have need of you, for those who are weak. You are pressed in the service to defend and to help them. These are part of the calls, or this is an example of a call to be a better person. If you're born under Taurus, or you have Taurus rising, Neptune is traveling through that part of your solar chart that has to do with mysticism. What this put me in mind of immediately was that they say that Buddha was a Taurus. Well, that's probably because of the Vesak festival, a holiday commemorating the birth, enlightenment, and death of Buddha, is celebrated during the full moon in May. Now, Buddha's original name was Siddhartha Gautama, And he was born into wealth. He was born into an extremely wealthy and well-to-do family. And what's interesting is that on his 29th birthday, he walked out on his wife and child, and he walked out on the family that he was born into. Now, if you're an astrologer or familiar with astrology, you can recognize right away that that 29th birthday meant that it took place during Siddhartha Gautama's first Saturn return, okay? And so this is when he denies himself the riches of the world, and he walks out on his wife and child and on his family that he was born into. His father, as I said, was very wealthy, and so Siddhartha gave up every pleasure that had been given to him. His father had answered every one of his desires. Anything that you want, his father bought and paid for. Basically Siddhartha was like a trust fund baby. And so Siddhartha had reached a point in his life where the value was empty. There was no value, that he felt empty in his life, and he walked out on his family, which, if you remember the time, was an extraordinary thing to do for the male of the household, to walk out on the wife and the child and his family and go and join hundreds of men and some women who had also left their families to live in the forests that grew along the banks of the Ganges River. Now, I'm not saying that as a Taurus, this is what you're going to be doing over your next 14 years, that you have to walk out on your family and your obligations and things like that and go live in a forest somewhere. But this is what Siddhartha did before he becomes Buddha. And he joins this sort of brotherhood and sisterhood. There's some women as well in the forest who had all shunned their families in order to seek the holy life. And as I said, I'm not saying that you're going to do this, but what you may begin to experience during this period of time that Neptune is traveling through the zodiac sign of Aries is an emptiness in the things that you have, in the pursuits that you follow. There may be a sense that you're not as into the job or the career as you were before, that obligations and responsibilities have lost their value to you, their resonance to you, that the more that you accrue or acquire, the more it feels like, what do they call it? Dust. I think that was the word that they used, that there was this feeling that the things that you owned were like dust. Not that they collected dust or anything like that, but they were like dust. They were things that settled on things. The possessions were things that settled on your life like a kind of dust. And this was a call to sort of brush off the dust. So you may be struck by this feeling of, as I said, an emptiness and a loss of direction. And it may not be exclusive to just the things that you own. It might even affect your philosophy. It might affect your outlook on life. It might even affect the religion that you belong to or the economic class that you are a part of. The money may not do it for you anymore. The God that you worship may not do it for you anymore. And these are mystical experiences. Mysticism is very different from religion. Religion was always pretty much scriptural based. It's based on a holy book or a holy set of rules and laws. Mystics were often the outsiders, when it came to religion. They were the people who probably practiced it much more reverently and much more intensely than the heads of a house of worship did. But mystics not only abandoned doctrine, abandoned dogma, but they would also see themselves as reforming or maybe even revolutionary figures, that they would oppose the different houses of worship and belief and accuse them of not being pure, of not being good, of not being really connected to or really ferociously committed to an understanding of the deity, whatever that deity, the expression of that deity, that formation, manifestation of that deity might be. So mystics were always about leaving what was doctrinal, leaving what was institutionalized, and finding that experience of God within oneself. Again, you can hear the Aries in that. I'm going to abandon this and go and find that for myself. What this could also mean for you, for people born under Taurus who have Taurus rising, is that you may be battling with your own inner demons during this period of time, certain behaviors that are counterproductive, or that are even abusive in some way, self-abusive in some way, self-sabotaging, I think is the word I'm looking for, you may find yourself really taking on that battle so that you overcome what you might perceive as being a weakness or a force that rules over your life. This may be, for instance, the good fight for you. And so this may also be something that grows and becomes more pertinent as Neptune begins or voyages through the zodiac sign of Aries for the next 14 years. The last idea that I want to leave with you is that you might also want to be very conscious of projecting that inner battle outwards. Okay. In other words, I'm battling with inner demons, parts of myself that I don't like. I'm going to vanquish them. And then now I'm going to become a crusader and point out all the inner demons of everyone I know and get them to, quit cigarettes or stop eating meat or things along those lines. I'm just grabbing give up your pet rocks. Okay. So, but be careful during this period of time. There can be a sort of righteousness that can come in with the fire. So be careful in this period of time that you're not projecting your own battle onto other people, dividing your worldview into the people who are good and the people that are evil. The whole point of Buddha was to sort of empty out in a way that I think is more extreme than most of us can practice in our lives nowadays, but to empty out of all of those judgments and all of those assumptions, to dedicate yourself to the path, to cleanse yourself. Again, I don't think you have to go to that extreme. I don't even think, in the case of Buddha, anyone can really go to that extent that he went to. But there is a path for you to follow. And that is, in the emptiness, to actually hear the call of your own spiritual life and to be open to that and to follow that wherever it may lead. Now, if you're born under Gemini or you have Gemini rising, the idea that comes to my mind when I think of Neptune and Aries in relation to you is right thinking. Let's remember that Aries rules the head and that your ruling planet, Mercury, rules the mind. So this idea of right thinking to me is something that I would suggest is something to meditate or reflect upon. Now, this doesn't mean always being right. Okay, like the good fight, right thinking is thinking that is healthy, that is good, that you can express and communicate, and that other people would also find as being healthy, positive, and good. Now, when you're born under Gemini, you have Gemini rising, you have a bit of a mixed reaction to the whole notion of belief. Mysticism is already something that kind of, you're not quite sure about it. The basic allegiance that you feel in your life is your allegiance to your mind. And you believe that most limits in life are self-imposed, that one's capacity to shortchange oneself, for instance, is based more on negative thinking, and it does greater harm than anything in the outside world could do. So this is more than just perceptions or beliefs or reactions to something. Geminis have a great deal of trust and faith in the power of the mind. All air signs, Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius, these are the three air signs, believe in mind over matter, and that the mind has a power or an ability to really go further than other capacities of our personality or of our very human being. So during this period of time that Neptune is traveling through the zodiac sign of Aries, you might find yourself being very careful about what you put into your mind, very vigilant about what you put into your mind. It's kind of like a parent who doesn't want their kids on social media because they know that social media is going to really, create some bad mental habits for the kids. So, no social media until you reach a certain age. That's almost kind of like what you're doing with this period of time that Neptune is going through Aries. You're going to want to promote good mental health thinking, I don't know, that could be thinking good thoughts, but let's do something more specific. Like, let's say you hear a word in conversation or you read a word in a text that you don't know, making a point of going and looking up that new word so that you understand what it is and so that you really absorb and understand what that word means. Or maybe it's something like, refraining from watching the news before going to bed because it results in troubled sleep. Or maybe it's reading a few lines of inspirational text that helps to focus you. These are things that are going to become much more important and probably practiced in a more disciplined way. Your aim over this period of time is to improve your mind and your life by also tapping into its latent power, becoming inventive rather than receptive, active rather than susceptible. If you can do that, if you can become more Marsy in the way that you approach things, of the mind, more disciplined, more focused, more vigorous, if you can do that, then you can turn the tables on life so that instead of circumstances having you by the tail, it's going to be you who direct the outcome of events. Each of us has the power to reshape our lives by reshaping our minds. And so this isn't just going to be a mental exercise for you, but it's also going to be something that impels you to get together with like-minded people who are of similar thinking to you. So this could be a very strong growth period for you intellectually and also in terms of disciplined thinking. But the thing that you want to watch out for, or maybe even guard against, because we're dealing with Aries and also with Mars, its ruler, is this us versus them mentality. Like these are the people who are right thinking and these are the people who are wrong thinking, and I have to out debate them or out talk them or champion over them verbally in some sort of way. Those are the things that you kind of want to be a little on guard against during this period of time. You're going to find that you're much more influential, that when you speak, people really do listen to what you have to say because of the sextile that exists between Aries and Gemini. And Neptune gives you that persuasiveness. So it's going to be really up to you to referee your own efforts. It's going to be up to you to cry foul if you're starting to be manipulative or if you're starting to bamboozle someone. You're going to be your own conscience here in this regard. And that's kind of a tall order, being our own conscience. But Aries as a zodiac sign really believes in being its own conscience. It's that fiery belief that I have to be mindful and I have to be moral and conscious of all of my actions. And that's something that doesn't always sit well with Geminis because you guys like to sort of bend the rules, but it's something that you're going to be very aware of during this time that Neptune is passing through the zodiac sign of Aries. If you're born under Cancer or you have Cancer rising, you can't help but be nurturing as an individual. You believe that if everyone has a place to call home and knew that they could count on loved ones and friends for support, and that if each person went to bed at night with a full stomach, then there would be nothing for anyone on this planet to worry about. All of life's problems would be solved. As a Cancer, you don't believe in big solutions to big problems. You believe in taking care of people's more mundane concerns, their more day-to-day concerns, their needs for food, for shelter, for love, their need to belong. You feel that if those needs are taken care of, then everything else will fall into place. It galls you that anyone should want for anything with all of the technology and all the resources we have on this planet. Yet for all of your empathy, for all of your support, for all of your natural nurturing tendencies, there's a part of you that knows that each of us makes the bed that we sleep in, and that in the end, we can only live our lives as best we can. And so you put your trust in the ripple effects that our daily actions have on one another. So this support for people, this care for people, this wanting to see to their needs and to see that they have no want, these are natural tendencies of Cancer. But Aries is a zodiac sign that forms a square to Cancer. It forms a square because it's a different season than Cancer is. Aries is associated with the spring equinox, and Cancer is associated with the summer solstice. These are two different seasons, and these two zodiac signs are coming from two different elements. Aries is fire, and Cancer is water. What's going to happen with Neptune being in the zodiac sign of Aries is that it's going to increase that Aries energy, that Mars energy in you, okay? So what's going to happen is that Mars, for instance, is connected to self-improvement, to making things better for yourself, to fighting the good fight. That might take on a little bit more of a militant intensity during the period of time that Neptune is traveling through Aries. In other words, where you were, empathetic and supportive and caring and nurturing, you may find that those emotions now are focused more on strengthening someone, instead of mommying them so much. That's kind of the phrase that's used. You're going to be more about, you need to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. There might be a little bit more of a toughness to your love, okay, that you may see teaching someone the idea of self-improvement as being very important for their survival. Before you might have felt like, oh, it's important, but they had a hard day and I'm going to be, softer about that and enjoin them to join me in eating a carton of ice cream. You may feel a more Mars tendency coming out, a more Aries tendency coming out. And so you might be like, we're going to skip that ice cream and we're going to, talk about what we can do to make you tougher in terms of taking on something. What that comes from is Mars, the ruling planet of Aries, has a tremendous fear of weakness. It can't abide by weakness. Weakness makes it very uncomfortable. So it can't abide by weakness in other people, and it can't abide by weakness in itself. And so you may begin to question whether the people that you support in your life or care about in your life or love in your life tried hard enough. Did they really give it their best shot? And so this can become a little bit more aggressive, a little bit more demanding. Now, these feelings that are coming out, this disposition that's coming out, may be rooted in the way that you were raised. So what you want to do is make sure that past patterns of behavior aren't suddenly running roughshod over your present life. What I'm getting at here is that Cancer is a parental sign, just like Aries is a parental sign. Cancer is the zodiac sign of the good mother, the mother who provides and has a sense of plenty. That's because of its association to the summer solstice here in the Northern Hemisphere. And Aries is also connected to a parent, but the parent that Aries is connected to is the father. And in particular, what I call coach dad. It's the father that, teaches you how to toughen up, to pick yourself up, when you've been thrown down, to if you did 50 push-ups one day, you're going to do 75 the next. And so that's where kind of hardness can sort of be coming out. And because of its position in the solar horoscope, this is dealing with the way you're acting as a parent, or maybe even the way that you're acting as an authority, as a boss, as someone who's in charge of other people. And so maybe some of that father stuff is creeping out. And even though you may feel like this is good for them, that might also be the moment to take a moment and to sort of check in with your feelings and say, is it good for them really? Or is it just something I'm doing because I've got Neptune in Aries, and Neptune in Aries feels that people should toughen up and be urgent? And, am I giving in to those Neptune and Aries impulses? So there may be different moments where you want to check in with that. What you want to remember is that it is always okay to be vulnerable, okay? It's always okay to express needs and to have needs. And that is a strength. Being vulnerable is what makes a Cancer a Cancer. And that can be a place of strength rather than be a place of weakness. Vulnerability, sensitivity, even if you have Neptune going through Aries, is nothing you should ever have to apologize for. If you're born under Leo, or you have Leo rising, Neptune in Aries is going to turn you into someone that people believe in. Aries is a fire sign, just like Leo is a fire sign. So Neptune in Aries is forming a trine to your zodiac sign. And so it's giving you this charisma. It's giving you this believability, this persuasion, this glamour. People look at you and suddenly they believe that you know what you're talking about and that you're maybe even someone that they should follow or at least listen to. Now, as a Leo, you already know that it's your personality with all of its talents and its gifts, its temperaments and quirks and humor. You know that all those elements make up who you are. And who you are is the single most valuable thing that you can bring to the table. Leo is also the zodiac sign of kings and queens. But as any public figure can tell you, or anyone who is in the public eye on a regular basis can tell you, once you accept that crown and scepter, once you accept that camera being trained on you, your life stops being your own. Now, Neptune in Aries, as I mentioned just a little bit before, is going to turn you into a sort of hook, kind of turns you into a kind of psychic hook for other people's admiration and other people's fascination. So this is less about the things that you do or your accomplishments or the honors that you collect, as it is kind of just entering into a room. Neptune glamorizes whatever zodiac sign it passes through, and here, because of the trine, it's going to be glamorizing your leonine charisma. So whenever you do something, people are going to regard it as seeming more special or important when you do it. Okay, so, if you laugh at a joke, everyone's going to be like, oh, that's funny because, you're a Leo and you're laughing at it. So I'm going to think it's funny too. Or if you have a turn of phrase or something like that, people will be like, what a marvelous turn of phrase. I wish I could turn my phrases like that. So you just have this confidence, this charisma, this magnetism that becomes even more so when Neptune is passing through the zodiac sign of Aries. So a Neptune trine gives you access to the collective unconscious. Now, that doesn't mean you're, talking one day and then you're suddenly replaced by an archetype or something along those lines, but it's going to give you an archetypal resonance. It's going to give you an archetypal impact, okay? So that what you say and what you do reverberates in the imaginations of the people around you. And it will be copied and mimicked and discussed. Now, this doesn't mean that every one of you who has a Leo sun and Leo rising is going to end up with your own television show on Netflix where you're showing people how to garden and dine and maybe even share some advice, all right? Although we probably will see a flood of people who are born under Leo or have Leo rising during this period of time, but it will show up in smaller ways. People will really be impacted by your presence. And as much as you capture people's attention, and this is going to be on a whole level that you're not accustomed to, and this might be a little bit more problematic for those of you who are born under Leo or have Leo rising who are more introverted or who are more, shy about being in the public eye. But as much as you capture people's attention, what you have to remember is that you're also going to be in an extremely vulnerable position because that adulation, that admiration carries more than just a hint of envy and hostility. It puts me in mind of our celebrity culture, the way that people, will follow someone's Instagram and follow every little detail and things like that. They're so delighted, when someone's star is on the rise. But what's also a little unsettling is how much delight people take in when someone who was once a star is now falling. They've fallen on hard times or they've gone into a downward spiral. There seems to also be a glee and a joy in that, and so this is why, people who are in the public eye know that, your life stops being personal or private when you're there. And so you really have to guard or curate that. There can be this feeling that people who admired you one day may also secretly, want to see what's going to happen when you lose that. So there can be envy or there can be hostility that's also associated with this as well. It's also a good thing to keep in mind that Neptune also rules over popular movements, that spontaneous gathering of people around a charged political or social issue. So during this time that Neptune is in Aries, you will be constantly reminded that you serve the interests of those who supported you, who elected you, funded you, or sponsored you. And that doesn't mean like you're running for public office or anything like that, but let's say you're on the community board or PTA or something like that. You'll be reminded by the people who put you there that they put you there, and they have an expectation that you represent what they want or what their demands are. Being a Leo or having Leo rising, that's something that's not going to really sit well with you. And so with the different pressures that are going to be on you to deliver in the way that people expect you to deliver, it's like a performer going on stage who, gives this wonderful performance. Well, the following night, people are going to want that same performance. It better be just as good, and we're not, something that you watch on TV that you can just like turn on the movie and the movie's going to play exactly like it did last time. We're human beings. We change in the moment. And so you're going to also need, in a way, every ounce of that solar self-centeredness, which is special, unique to Leo, that ability to be who you are, no matter what the pressures or the demands are. You're going to be calling on every ounce of that over the next 14 years, because this could be a very high-pressured environment. Not only are you being adored and celebrated, but there's going to be a lot of demands and also other feelings thrown into the mix. And so this is something where you're going to grow as a person, but at the same time, you're going to need to keep your feet solidly in the ground of your zodiac sign and to look to yourself to always hold the center, no matter how extreme the life around you gets. If you're born under Virgo, or you have Virgo rising, during this period of time that Neptune is in Aries, you're going to do a lot of things that you said you'd never, ever do in your life. Or you're going to find yourself in situations you swore that you'd never go near. Now, let's break this down a little bit. Aries is basically the superhero of the zodiac, okay? Aries really espouses and takes seriously its heroic code. And so it will always go running to the rescue of someone who is in need. That's something that as a Virgo, you can understand. You may not necessarily go running to the rescue of someone who's in need, but you're always there to help out. You're always there to help someone. Your commitment to helping people to help themselves is very powerful. It's very strong. So helping people is something that's baked into the zodiac signs of Aries and Virgo. It's something you will always do. And with Neptune moving through the zodiac sign of Aries, it's a situation that will be coming up again and again. But what's challenging here is Neptune. Aries has a very strong sense of themselves. And Virgo has a very strong sense of themselves as well. Probably a stronger sense of service, but a very strong sense of themselves. Neptune is a planet that's famously associated with self-sacrifice, all right? And Neptune is also a planet that's famously associated with scandal. Now, Neptune's transit through that part of your solar horoscope that has to do with sex, death, and other people's money, okay, taboo subjects, is also associated with taboos itself. And so what you need to remember here, as people are coming to you with their problems or their crises, and you may see a lot of people's problems escalate into crises during the period of time that Neptune is traveling through Aries, you're being called upon to help them out of different situations. And these situations, as I said, are going to be situations that are a bit of a slippery slope. You might not be getting told the whole story of what's going down. There may be situations in which you feel like you're out of your depth, and part of you is like, I really shouldn't get involved in this. But the Neptune in Aries is going to say, but no one else can take care of this. You need to get involved in this. So you may find yourself putting yourself in more risky situations or being more reckless than you normally would, where before as a Virgo, you would be like, oh, wow, you're dealing with something which is bigger than I can handle. Here's contact information for resources you could draw upon. Okay, like that might have been your response before. During this period of time that Neptune is moving into Aries, you may find yourself like, forget the contact number, I'm going to help you with this. And you may find yourself regretting having plunged into the depths of what is going on. You need to remember during this period of time that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And so you'll be learning a lot about this with Neptune moving through the zodiac sign of Aries. Self-sacrifice is another thing that's going to really push some buttons with you. As a Virgo, you will always be there to serve. You will always be there to help someone to help themselves. But you're very sensitive to the idea of being used and abused. You're very sensitive to the idea of being exploited. Virgo's motto to me, like if I were to have a t-shirt that I could give to Virgo, it would be, nobody owns me. Okay, you aren't owned by someone. So you can serve someone, but you're never subservient. So during this period of time where Neptune is exerting more of its self-sacrificial tendencies, you may feel like you're losing yourself in doing service for someone else. And that where, again, usually in the past, you would have asserted yourself by maybe saying that's enough or putting down a boundary or walking out, you might find yourself returning again and again and again, that the need that someone has of you is so intense and it's so great that you can't say no to it. There's a part of you that may get involved in questionable situations where someone's like, I'm in a failed relationship and you're the only person I can turn to, and so the person's turning to you and it begins by confiding in you the difficulties in their relationship. And maybe it gets a little closer. Maybe it becomes a little bit more. Or, maybe someone's like, oh, can I keep this item with you? And you're kind of like, well, what is it? It's a beloved heirloom or something. And maybe it's something that they stole or took or something like that. And you're the one with, so you really kind of have to watch out for questionable situations. But it's not just a questionable situation. It's your willingness to be drawn into the questionable situation. That's the thing that you're going to want to keep in mind, because a whole part of you is going to be like, I want to get lost in this adventure. I want to get lost in this scandal, and there's another part of you which is like, this is a scandal. This could get you into real troubled water. That's your Virgo talking. And you have to sort of check in with that Virgo and not let yourself get lost in the allure or the sensation of some of these adventures. Clearly, there are going to be some hard life lessons that you will be learning during this 13-year period, but they also may prove to be the wealth of the experience that they bring. In other words, sometimes when we hear the word hard life lesson, it's like, oh, I'm just like not going to do it. Like if going down that path is going to be difficult, I'm not going to do it. Well, then how would you ever learn? And how would you ever experience? And how would you ever grow? We all, make decisions that maybe we think better of or go down paths that might not have been well advised at the time. But in the long run, and when you look back later on, you may find yourself not regretting that that's what happened. Or I learned so much. It wasn't easy, but boy, I learned so much. And this is something that's so valuable. So we can't always make the best choices or the best judgments of things that have yet to happen. It's only in hindsight that we can really understand the value of them. And that's something that I want you to keep in mind during this period of time. As I said, you may be doing some things that you swore you'd never do, but they may also deliver a wealth of experience that you never would have gained otherwise. If you're born under Libra or you have Libra rising, the big question for you with Neptune traveling through the zodiac sign of Aries, a zodiac sign that sits opposite you on the zodiacal wheel, is what does a relationship mean to you now? Now, we all know that Libra is the zodiac sign of relationships. Libras value relationships tremendously, and they're, in a way, all about relationship. If you have your sun in Libra, for instance, you identify with being in a relationship. Now, that doesn't mean that if you're not in a relationship, you have no identity, okay? And I bring that up because when I began practicing astrology, one of the big hit books at the period of time was Women Who Love Too Much, And it was a horrible book that was shaming women for loving too much and losing themselves and not having boundaries and making them feel wretched about it. The thing is, there are people who want to be in relationships and people who don't want to be in relationships. And there's also such a thing as relationships aren't always amorous relationships. You're in a relationship with someone you work with, or you're involved in a creative collaboration with someone. But there can be different relationships that aren't just based on love and romance. You can be in a relationship or a partnership with someone you work with. You can be in a relationship or a partnership with someone that you collaborate with on creative projects or enterprises. You may feel a great fidelity towards the person who walks your dog or does your dry cleaning. I mean, all relationships are important to a Libra. It's not just the romantic relationship. But what does a relationship mean to you now? Right now, you might not have a lot of trust in relationships. And that's because it's been a bumpy past 2 years with the eclipses going through the zodiac signs of Aries and Libra. And you may not have much patience for people who aren't keeping their end of the bargain, or for people who are trying to mess up your life, or for people who are no-shows, who just don't show up. In fact, you may be feeling right now a lot like, I don't want that kind of aggravation in my life. I don't want that kind of relationship in my life. And so I'm forswearing them. And that might not be the worst idea right now. You might need some time by yourself, away from people who are bringing expectations of who you are and the way that you behave into a relationship. As a Libra, whether it's a spouse or a lover or a dog walker, you are the person who takes care of your relationship. It's like Cancers take care of the home, okay? It's a sign that's associated to the good mother. With a Libra, you're the custodian of the relationship. You take care of the relationship. When you're in a relationship with someone, you don't, dissolve and become one person. You're very aware that you're two different people. You're two separate people. That's why we see in Libra the scale with the two dishes, okay? And what binds these dishes to one another is the arc above them, okay? The handle of the scale. And so that handle of the scale is the relationship itself. So you can have one person in a relationship, another person in a relationship, and they are bound to one another by the relationship. It's a contract. It's a treaty. It's a pledge. It's a betrothal. But as a Libra, you see yourself as being in charge of that. And that you know that there are certain things that you're going to have to give up on your end in order to make this relationship work. And the expectation is that your partner understands that there are certain things that they're going to have to give up on their end in order to make the relationship work. But what you've been experiencing lately is either someone who is expecting you to do all the work or the sacrificing in the relationship, or someone who's such a hot mess that you have to compensate for them. So there's a lot of maybe policing of yourself that's going on during this period of time. Like, not only am I in charge of this relationship, but I have to police my behavior in this relationship. I have to make sure that my boundaries are secure and that I'm giving, but that I'm also getting back and I'm listing my needs. There may be a sort of self-consciousness that's entered into some of these alliances of yours, some of these relationships of yours, because you're always trying to calculate what makes the relationship fair and balanced to both parties involved. And as I said, you've gone through some period of time recently that's really thrown that out of balance. It's thrown that out of whack. And that causes a lot of difficulty for you because an unbalanced Libra is never a good thing. But sometimes an unbalanced Libra is a necessary thing. You have to sort of get away from that balance to find the balance again. It's just like how people will say, you need to lose yourself to find yourself. Well, as a Libra, you need to lose the relationship in order to find the relationship. There's a very good word for you to think about over the next 14 years that Neptune is traveling through the zodiac sign of Aries. It's a very Aries word. It's a very Mars word. And that word is camaraderie. What is the meaning of a comrade? Okay, a comrade we think of, well, right off the bat as a friend or a trusted companion. But there's a little bit more involved in that. A comrade is a friend or a trusted companion whom you've been involved in a difficult crisis or a situation together. You know, it's kind of like two soldiers in the trenches. You know, they're in the same trench. Okay. So a comrade is someone who's had your back. A comrade is someone that you've gone through a very difficult time with. Okay. And because you went through this difficult time, you shared this experience, this person is trusted. This person is someone who's very close to you. We see that all the time with Army veterans getting together, you know, with people that they had fought with. They had gone through those difficult times, or the companionship, the camaraderie that involves people in the armed forces. They know what it's like to be in those difficult situations, to go through something that's really difficult and challenging and where they're feeling oppressed or under assault or under attack. A lot of times, a Libra's focus can go to the relationship and holding the relationship together and being true to the rule or law of the relationship. And so sometimes the focus can go to the rules and laws of being in the right relationship. But during this period of time that Neptune is in Aries, it's going to glamorize that aspect of Aries that's connected to the good fight. All right. And so the good fight could actually refer to the person that you've been in the trenches with. You know, in other words, it may change your gaze. It may get you to look at people differently, that instead of a person that would make the right relationship, you're looking at the person who was there for you when you went through the good fight, when you went through the difficulty, when you went through the challenge, the ordeals together. And that's something that really binds you to that person. And again, this might be something that you feel in relationships with people who have been the comrade, you know, in your life, the friend or the companion. But if you're talking about a love relationship, this might change the way that you look at it. A relationship shouldn't put you in the therapist's chair, okay? And what I mean by the therapist's chair is you shouldn't be the therapist. You shouldn't be the person who's dealing with your partner's issues or asking them questions and helping to rehabilitate them. That should not be your role as a Libra in your relationship. Your relationship needs to be with someone who gets what it's like when the going gets tough. It's someone who had your back. It's someone who would never leave you in the lurch. It's someone who's always going to be there for you, even if they have to go through hell and high water. It might not be the person that you might choose right away or maybe even be drawn to before, but I think Neptune in Aries is going to change that. And so it's going to change the way that you look at all relationships, your professional ones too. And I think it's going to be less about the resume or the credentials or what looks right, and more about the experience, what this person has gone through with you, okay, what you both share in terms of these difficult experiences. This is the thing that's going to alter and change the nature of your relationships. And in my opinion, with Neptune going through Aries for the next 14 years, it's going to change the nature of your relationships for the better. If you're born under Scorpio, or you have Scorpio rising, This period of time that Neptune is moving through the zodiac sign of Aries is going to be a period of time that, well, the phrase that really comes to mind for me is right living. Yes, that's the phrase that comes to mind to me, and one that I want to share with you. Now, as a Scorpio, you probably already know that Aries and Scorpio have a lot in common. You both share the same ruling planet, which is the planet Mars, named after the Roman god of war, associated to combat and to fighting. And we discussed earlier in the broadcast that Neptune going through the zodiac sign of Aries is going to glamorize these ideas into the notion of the good fight. But with Neptune and Aries moving through that part of the solar horoscope that has to deal with the body, work, and service, you may find yourself wanting to purify yourself. Purification is something that is associated to the two elements, fire and water. There's coming through the fire, like when people do fire walking or something like that. There's a sort of purification through fire, and that's connected to going through ordeals and difficulties, and you're purified in the kiln, in the crucible, in the fire. But there's also the purification of water, something to keep in mind that Scorpio is a water sign. And the purification through water was baptismal in origin. It was the idea of being baptized and sins being washed away and purity being restored. So there's the purity of fire, which burns away anything that's toxic or has germs, something that's corrosive. And then there's the purification of water, which is the cleansing of sins, the cleansing of evil, cleansing of bad things, and the idea of starting again. So this theme of purification, both in its fiery aspect and its watery aspect, is going to be important to you as Neptune journeys through the zodiac sign of Aries over the next 14 years. And as I said before, the phrase that I really want to use with you is right living, all right? Now, that could be something as simple as I'm going to detox, or I'm going to change my diet, or, I'm saying no to alcohol and drugs and things along those lines. And there can even be a sort of abstinence that might be associated to it as well. Now, you're not going to be doing all of this because you're a do-gooder or you're being particularly moralistic. You're going to be doing this for the experience, that getting rid of maybe bad habits or toxic elements of your diet is actually getting rid of bad things in your life. Maybe you're dropping pounds, maybe you're reshaping the way your body looks, but it's more about cleaning house where your soul resides, okay? We have a phrase in life, which is get your house in order, and getting your house in order can be spring cleaning. I'm getting my house in order and I'm going through the closets and getting rid of all the things I don't want anymore and tidying up and getting organized. But there's also getting your house in order, like getting your act together. It could be like saying no to the people who come into your life that are not a good influence, that they're going to upset you or that they're going to make you feel miserable or they leave you, and rekindle those feelings of abandonment and rejection. Saying no to that, being more stoic and being more Spartan about it. Stoicism and Spartanism are two ideas that are very much associated with Mars, okay? Because it's about discipline, it's about putting yourself first, and it's about saying no to anything that's going to take you off the path that you want to follow. So it's saying no to the bad love pursuits. It's saying no to the jobs that don't fulfill you. It's saying no to the drinks that you regret having had the following morning, or the way that you tuck into some of that comfort food and the way it makes you feel not comfortable in the morning. Saying no to all of those things and dumping and getting rid of the things that don't serve you. So there's a purging that's going to be going on with this Neptune in Aries period of time. There's a purging, there's an unloading, getting rid of things that you just don't want taking up room in your life, stealing emotional focus, stealing spiritual focus for you. And it's getting things clean and it's getting things right. And that's what I mean by right living. What the Neptune in Aries may also bring about is feeling drawn to humanitarian organizations, to serving the community in some sort of way. You may concentrate on things like wanting to do something to help out with education or with outreach or human services. It might start with volunteer work, but then it might take on more of a life of its own, where you're providing some kind of service that you find really fulfilling. And so this might be something that's also important to you during this period of time, drawing on both the water and the fire instincts. Something that might be more drawing on the fire instinct than the water instinct may be you starting to become a little bit more political. It's a little bit more advocacy, championing the rights of people that are being trod upon. And this might be based on a personal incident that transforms you from a bystander to a player. So don't be surprised if you find yourself taking on fervent causes and wanting to go out there and do something about it, wanting to go out there and to affect a change. Now, I'm not saying that you have to drop what you're doing in your life and go become an activist. I'm not saying you have to get radicalized or, toss a Molotov cocktail in some direction. But what may resonate with you very powerfully during this period of time is that politics has its roots in people and not in elected officials. And I'm hearkening back to that phrase from the Declaration of Independence that I shared with you earlier in this broadcast. It's the idea that each person makes a difference, and that is the consent of people who hold elected office to serve the people, but when that switches the other way around, when people who are holding that office aren't serving the people, it's then that you have cause to remove them or to get rid of the position. All right. So politics isn't just a political system or, something that only shows up when you have voting day. Politics has its roots in people and not in elected officials. Now, who knows? Maybe you might run for city council or something along those lines. You might feel that motivated. You might feel that outraged during this period of time. But certainly, you're going to be very aware of the role that you play in society. And so that's where the fire is taking you more out of the private sector that Scorpio can sort of retreat to, and more into the arena where ideas are debated and fiercely discussed. That might be one thing that manifests in your life over the next 14 years. Another thing might be something that comes out of the volunteer work, might be something like street ministry. That's probably a big word there, street ministry. And I am kind of thinking of Mother Teresa and her missionaries of charity, where they would serve the homeless or the people on the street. That might actually have an appeal to you. You might become very aware of those who are disadvantaged and wanting to help and serve them in some sort of way. But a street ministry was this idea of getting out of the church or a house of worship and getting onto the street. My experience of street ministry comes from Vatican II in the 1970s. And it was the idea of getting away from the altar and out into the street and out with the people and talking about, basically serving a higher purpose, talking about what their needs were, their feelings of injustice, their hopes, their worries, their anxieties. So that might be something that sort of shows up in your life, that sort of kicks it up a notch from you giving advice to friends to you actually working with people in more needful conditions than what you might experience with just giving advice to a friend. Another thing that might, suddenly capture your imagination is playing around with the idea of becoming an end-of-life doula. I don't know if you know what that is, but that's someone who provides companionship, comfort, and guidance to those who are planning for death or who have been diagnosed with a terminal illness or are facing imminent death. You might be kind of like, okay, where are we going with this? But what I'm addressing here is that Scorpio is a zodiac sign that, very much resonates with the underworld. It resonates with death or end-of-life transition. and believes that that end of life transition is something really important. It's something that's very sacred, and so this might be something that comes up in your life where it's not about having the answers for someone who's facing an end of life situation or a situation where they're ill, but providing companionship or comfort and being there for someone. And again, this isn't saying that you're going to experience this in your own life with the people closest to you, but it might be something because of its intensity and perhaps because of its sacrality that you might seek with people that you don't know, with strangers, that you might deliberately seek out, providing that companionship or comfort to people that aren't a part of your life. It might be, again, your way of getting into the streets. It might be your way of getting into community. And it might give you an ability to express yourself in a way that you don't express yourself in your regular day-to-day life. So these are some of the ideas that I just sort of want to drop as notions during this period of time that Neptune is traveling through the zodiac sign of Aries. And these are things that might really speak to the intensity of your own personal experience and may also provide some kind of outlet, a path, an outlet, an activity that you might find not only fulfilling, but also tremendously rewarding. Now, if you're born under Sagittarius, or you have Sagittarius rising, this period of time that Neptune is traveling through the zodiac sign of Aries is going to be a very romantic time for you. Oh, that sounds wonderful. Romance. And when I'm using the word romantic, yes, I'm talking about hearts and flowers. That's always a lovely and a wonderful thing. But I'm also using romance in the understanding of the romantic period that Western civilization experienced during the 18th century. But what it did is that it emphasized inspiration, subjectivity, and the primacy of the individual. In other words, it was the experience of being individual that was so important. And this is something that's going to start flooding into your life when Neptune makes its way through the zodiac sign of Aries. As a Sagittarius, you haven't had the clearest idea of the way forward in recent years. In fact, you've sort of gotten tackled by a lot of difficult circumstances coming out of left field, and you've had a lot of struggle that's taken place. And during that period of time, you kind of lost your humor, although Sagittarians never really lose their humor, but you kind of lost that sense of being connected to a higher purpose in your life. And recently, that has begun to come back into your life again. And it's going to grow. It's going to become much stronger and much more powerful. But also the way that you value experience, your personal experience in life, is going to become much more important to you. It was the British statesman Edmund Burke who said, "All that stuns the soul, all that imprints a feeling of terror leads to the sublime." What we're talking about here is that those experiences in life that stun not your consciousness, but your soul, that open up this feeling that you don't know how life works or what's at work in life. So the stunning of the soul takes you out of your day-to-day life. It takes you to a place in your life. He uses this feeling of terror, which is very romantic, but it can sort of translate nowadays to this feeling of awe. Okay. And there might be panic in the sense of what's familiar is falling away. But these, instead of rocking your world in a negative way, leads to a sublime experience. Now, these are experiences which evoke a sense of awe. And as I said, as Edmund Burke says, even tinged with fear, but they can lead to a profound and elevated aesthetic experience known as the sublime. This is what the Romantic movement was all about. It was all about getting away from the artifice of civilization. It followed on the heels of the Enlightenment, which was more scientific based and more about emphasizing the rational mind. And Enlightenment also brought us equal rights and the Declaration of Independence and democracies as we understand them. People not genuflecting to a king, but being themselves. But there was still a sense that there was a sort of self that you needed to be. And that was someone with a scientific mind and a rational way of thinking. And, what was associated to the civilized, to what was socially acceptable. What the Romantics were trying to do is get you away from that and reconnect you to what's natural about the human nature. Okay. So it was to get away from the artificiality of civilization. It was to get away from the empty promises of European Christianity. In other words, the experience was that, the church, or being a Christian, there were these moral ethics which were not only upheld and constrictive, but corseted people's souls. It turned people into very judgmental, parochial types of beings. And so they lost their sense of God. God is nature. And so Romanticism was about going back out into nature to experience God. Again, it's the mystical notion of Neptune. Let's go experience God away from an altar, away from a house of worship, away from prayers, away from sacred texts. Let's go experience God in the world. Let's experience God with other people, but away from house of worship, but other people maybe from different areas of life. Let's go experience it in nature. Let's give free flight to all of this. Let's give free allowance. And so the Romantic movement dealt a lot with the mysterious in life, the things that we could never really understand. And the experience was sublime. We were releasing our spirit away from its constraints, away from, the shoes and the clothes it had to wear. And we were releasing it into the world so that we could experience nature in this grand level. Now, that might strike some people as being, wow, that's dramatic. But nothing's too dramatic for a fire sign, all right? Sagittarius is a fire sign. Neptune is in the zodiac sign of Aries. You get that idea of a quest, a knight's quest. You get that idea of looking for the Holy Grail. You get that idea of experiencing God not in Camelot, but, in other lands and in foreign places, as far away from the court as you could possibly experience it. So as you might imagine, this will definitely stir up your sense of wanderlust, but you're not going to be going out into the world as a tourist. It's really going to be almost like a pilgrimage, where you want to visit the holy sites. You want to go and visit places that resonate with you. And those holy sites can be different things in your life. Those holy sites could be, actual cathedrals or springs that heal or something along those lines. But they can also be holy sites as we experience in the day-to-day. What you're going to feel is that you're not looking for inspiration anymore. Inspiration is flowing through you, and it's leading you to people, places, and situations that you're going to find spiritually enriching, but also are taking place in the theater of your humanity. So you're not like turning your back on the world, living a very scholarly or penitent or removed life. You're living in the world and you're experiencing the world as a sacred place. All right. And this is something that the Neptune in Aries is going to be bringing about. Fire signs seek sensation. That's why this is an element that has such extreme ups and downs. When you are experiencing a sensation that's overwhelming, it takes over you. It's so powerful. It's transcendent. And then if you're experiencing something that's dull and dreary, you can't even fake interest. You're completely bored and you're falling asleep, or you want to be the furthest thing away. So when you have this Neptune in Aries coursing through your life, then you're feeling inspiration beneath your wings. The wind is at your back. You're feeling that tongue of fire over your head 24/7. It's something that will grow in its intensity, but I don't think it's going to lead you into something doctrinal. In fact, I think it's going to lead you in a different direction, which is experiential, something that is away from what's institutionalized or well framed, and something that you're experiencing. And that's going to be an experience that you share with someone who gets it, with someone who's also with you on this pilgrimage, this quest, this adventure. You may have little, if any, patience with people who don't get it. And if anything, you might be avoiding their company altogether. So you're really leaning into your creativity during this period of time. You're really leaning into your spiritual life. You're leaning into your love of philosophy and higher meaning. Okay, these are all things that are going to be very, very powerful. What's interesting about this is that you're not going to see yourself as special as much as you're going to see yourself as living in special times. Okay, so you're going to be very present tense as Neptune gets underway into Aries and grows in its light and flame. You'll be very present tense, and you'll be recognizing those things in your life. What you're also going to be involved in here is your own spiritual evolution. We often use the phrase personal evolution, and it's almost interchangeable with self-improvement. I'm involved in a personal evolution and I'm becoming a better person. This is evolution more as it was being described by Darwin, that I referred to earlier, but it's taking place in a spiritual way. You are changing. You're going to feel that your spirit is unfolding in your life, and that you are changing, and that you're experiencing the world differently. So this is going to change your relationships, your associations, even your pursuits in life. But I want to leave it open-ended deliberately, because evolution is open-ended deliberately. There's no end point to evolution. Evolution is an unfolding creation. All right. That's part of what made it so shocking to people who were first introduced to Darwin, that there wasn't a divine plan, that there wasn't a target that we were getting to. Darwin's point was like, no, we are constantly evolving. It's not something that was prehistoric and then now we're here. We're not even the crown of evolution, and evolution is about diversity, spreading out in all sorts of different directions and intermingling all sorts of different members of a species and coming up with new and varied forms, so that that source species isn't really recognized anymore. Look at humanity, how different we all are, yet, we all derive from an original source. And there's a splendor to that. There's a diversity to that. There's an eclecticism and a richness to that. Now take that idea and apply it to your own life, that your different pursuits and interests and fascinations, thoughts and dreams and hopes and creativity and creative expression, that's what's coursing through your own life. So you're going to feel yourself evolving. It's more than just margins widening and experiencing the world in a new, grand, bolder way, but it's the participation in the world and the world's participation in you. That's what I think is going to be so exciting and so enriching about Neptune traveling through the zodiac sign of Aries for the next 14 years. If you're born under Capricorn, or you have Capricorn rising, this period of time when Neptune is traveling through the zodiac sign of Aries, it's really putting you in a position of centrality in your life that you haven't really experienced before. One of my favorite movies when I was a teenager, it came out, and I saw it several times, was Jesus Christ Superstar. I loved Jesus Christ Superstar. I loved the music of it. I loved the way that it told the story of the gospel and the way that it was performed. It was really powerful. And it also struck me when I first saw it as like frightening, because it's like, what are hippies doing playing gospel stories? I was raised Catholic. I no longer practice. I can't in good conscience, but I still carry those things that I learned about Catholicism, the things that I really, truly value. And so this is what came out in Jesus Christ Superstar in a very strange and different kind of way. One of my favorite moments in the film, one of my favorite songs in the entire musical, is Could We Start Again, Please? It's sung by Mary Magdalene, who's played by Yvonne Elliman, I think, in the film. And it comes at this moment where Jesus has been arrested by the Roman soldiers and he's being taken away from the company of the apostles. And so Mary Magdalene sings, "I've been living to see you, dying to see you, but it shouldn't be like this. This was unexpected. What do I do now? Could we start again, please? I've been very hopeful so far. Now, for the first time, I think we're going wrong. Hurry up and tell me this is just a dream, or could we start again, please? I think you've made your point now. You've even gone a bit too far to get the message home. Before it gets too frightening, we ought to call a halt. So, could we start again, please?" I love this song so much. And I love what it's communicating. First of all, there are three laments, three things that frame the question, could we start again, please? And of course, it mirrors Peter's three denials of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane. But what speaks to me so much of Capricorn meeting Aries here is in their different approaches to life. Neptune and Aries, we know, is connected to the good fight. That's the idea that I want to share with you, that Neptune is Aries is about the good fight. And Aries is about moving forward, no matter what. You just keep going forward. And Capricorn is about that hesitancy, that resistance to moving forward, that are you sure that this is the best course? There's a reluctance that Capricorn has of seeing something through to the end, especially if it's very combative or if it's very difficult. If it's an arduous path, if it's a difficult climb, Capricorn's got no problem with it. They'll do that. But if Capricorn is involved in a fight, something that's changing the world that they're used to, there can be a drawing back from it. And that's what's getting communicated in this song. Mary Magdalene, who had been, one of the followers of Jesus, who had really opened her heart and soul to him, is like, well, has this gone too far? Have we taken things too far? So she's really addressing the radicalization element of what being an apostle was, okay? That there was, doing things that were radically different, that was overthrowing what had come before. And now she's seeing the consequences of that. Jesus has been arrested and is being marched off by Roman soldiers to be crucified, to be killed. And she's like, can we stop this now? Does it really have to go this far? I mean, it's one thing to fight for your beliefs, but giving your life for it, does it have to really be like that? And then she shares with him in the second verse, I've been very hopeful, and she's talking about her faith. Being with you instilled this faith in me. You made me believe in the future. You made me believe in the kingdom of God and that we're living in the kingdom of God. And this is a wonderful thing. But now, since the first time that I gave up my life before and I followed you, I think something's going wrong. And can you tell me it's just a dream, that we can wake up from this, that no one has to die here, that you don't have to die here? And the third part, which is the message, she's saying, okay, I got your message. I got your message that, we have to change our lives. And by changing our lives, we change the world around us. I got your message about being, bringing the kingdom of heaven down to earth right now. You've made your point, but again, maybe it's gone too far. And you brought the message home. We get it, but let's stop. It doesn't have to be like this. And I love that because there's the zeal and the appeal of Neptune and Aries. Come forward, Capricorn, go forward. You have a sense of where you're going in your life right now. Be bold in where you're going. And Capricorn is like, okay, I believe that. I'm coming out of Pluto having been in my sign for ever, 12 years. But, I'm coming out of that. I'm embracing my fresh future, but I'm also seeing the cost, that it can have. Now, I'm not saying to Capricorns, like, someone's going to get hurt or anything like that. It's not that, but the cost of leaving behind the life that you knew, and really embracing this new course, and that this new course is more than a feel good thing. It's going to cost or have an impact on your life that's personal, perhaps financial, spiritual, all these sorts of things. That's what this Neptune in Aries is saying. We're making a fresh future here. And so what it puts me in mind of is that where I see Capricorns right now with Neptune in Aries is where the apostles were with the departure of Christ, that Pentecostal oath, or that Pentecost that I was referring to earlier in Aries. It's this feeling that Christ has departed and now it's on you. So what I see happening here for Capricorn is that it was one thing when there was a path that you were following, when you were coming out of the darkness of the Pluto, and that you were experiencing your rebirth, okay, which is what many Capricorns have been experiencing, a new world. But then that thing that moved you forward, maybe it was a goal, maybe it was an inspiration, maybe it was a person, maybe it was an institution, maybe it was something that you believed in, the realization that that is gone now, either through disillusionment, which is part of this experience, or through the removal or the absence. For some people, they might have had a feeling that their vision of the future has been terribly shaken and even destroyed. But what do? Do you go back? Do you not follow through? Do you give up? Capricorns don't answer that in the way that an Aries does. In Aries, it's simple. It's like, no, you don't give up. Power through. That's Aries' solution. With Capricorn, there's a gathering of strength through doubt. There's a gathering of strength through melancholy. There's a gathering of strength through a realization that this has gone too far, and that this is changing the rules on a fundamental way. So Capricorns gain strength through their hesitation. And so think about that for a moment. I mean, like, it's been centuries since, but imagine, I don't know, having been an apostle and being left with this emptiness, this loss of the person that you were following, and then having to take onto your own shoulders what that vision is. Something that I always related to in the Gospels, and it really finds its expression in astrology as well. And astrology and Christianity actually were companions on the road together for many centuries in Europe, but that's a talk for another time. The kingdom of God is at hand. It didn't mean the kingdom of God is imminent. The kingdom of God is what you're living in your life right now. It's unfolding in your life right now. It's like that idea of evolution is an ongoing creative process. The kingdom of God is an ongoing creative process. Now we're using kingdom of God, and that's got some baggage attached to it. But whatever is a deity for you, whatever serves as a source of sacred or sacrality in you, and Neptune will always talk about what's sacred, but not what's sacred as in you never take it off the shelf, but what's sacred as that thing that infuses your life, okay? That invisible world, whatever that is unfolding in your life right now. And you have a responsibility to further that in your life. You're an earth sign, so you're always going to ally with this world. You love this world, you understand this world, you're good to this world is good to you. What you're going to experience with Neptune in Aries is heaven on earth, okay? And that it's really transforming the earth into heaven, Okay, now that might sound fantastical, that might sound romantic, that might sound utopian, but that's what's taking place here. Divinity is not up in the stars, removed and far away. Divinity is here where we live. And this is the message of Neptune. It's the message that Neptune has always stood by. So you may feel at times with Neptune moving through Aries like the task is too challenging, or can't you go back the way you came, or you can't see the way ahead, or the changes in your life are bigger than the ones that you wanted to make, But at the same time, this unfolding is taking place. And if you put your faith in a divinity that isn't removed from you, but that you were made in the image of. So each of us in our multiplicity, each of us in our variety, each of us in our diversity mirrors the diversity of the divinity. Put yourself in that place, take strength in that, and you'll find that you've actually stepped out of a place of fear and into a place that is more sublime and into a place that's more inspirational, but it's continually unfolding. It's not going to be doctrinal. It's not going to be set in stone. You're going to find yourself being a participant in the unfolding of your own life. You are also streaming into the rivers and the streams and the ponds and the brooks of other people's lives, and that you yourself are involved in this extremely creative endeavor, this endeavor of moving into a fresh future. If you're born under Aquarius, or you have Aquarius rising, you have this innate ability, you've always had this innate ability, to stand both inside and outside of a situation. What you're going to find as Neptune travels through the zodiac sign of Aries. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. Aquarius is like the 11th out of 12. It's towards the end. It's just in front of the caboose. So Aries has a way of being much more personal and much more intense, whereas Aquarius has a tendency to be more remote and maybe even removed. What this Neptune in Aries is going to do, because Aries is in a fire sign, and fire forms a natural sextile to air, and Aquarius is an air sign, what you're going to find is that Neptune's tenure in the zodiac sign of Aries brings a more personal dimension to outside concerns of yours, and it also brings a more objective criterion to the most intimate and sensitive issues. So a lot of times people will talk about Aquarius and say, you need to get more grounded. What I see with Neptune being in Aquarius is you're becoming more intimate. You're becoming more personally invested, because the great strength of Aries is in its personalness. Aries takes things personally. And so that's the energy that it's going to be bringing to your zodiac sign. Now, you know that words and feelings don't always flow together, just like rules aren't the truest guides for behavior, and social concerns don't always respect individual freedom. You know this. You understand the contradiction. In fact, you've lived inside that contradiction for longer than you know. But during this time that Neptune is traveling through Aries, you're going to be finding a way to honor both the rule and the exception. Let's return to your two ruling planets. Aquarius is one of the few signs in the zodiac that has two ruling planets, Uranus and Saturn. Yours are the most, set against one another. So Uranus will always bring out your idealistic side, and Saturn will always bring out your pragmatic side. And you have to honor both masters, okay, when these are your two ruling planets. And you often struggle with this deep split. There will be times when you can see how things should be, but lack the means to bring them about. And there will be times when you have the means, but you're not able to bring those things about because you're so bogged down by responsibilities and tasks and obligations, things that prevent you from being able to act freely. So this is something that you've lived with, maybe most, if not all of your life. I don't know, but certainly for a good period of time in your life. And this is something that's going to start to change. You're going to feel less like a pendulum swinging between these extremes, a pendulum swinging between Uranus and Saturn, the idealistic and the pragmatic. Neptune in Aries, in a lot of ways, is going to build a bridge between these two, and something in which you can access both ideas, in which you have the means and the ends, all right? But this isn't going to just be delivered to you. The clouds aren't going to part one day and say, here are the means and here are the ends, and they go together, and here they are, Aquarius. That's not the way it's going to happen. What it's going to happen is in your interactions with people in your day-to-day life. Aquarius can sometimes get so big picture that they miss the things that are in the picture for the picture itself, all right? Neptune in Aries emphasizes your one-on-one associations with people you know and people you don't know, all right? So Neptune in Aries is going to bring you it's going to involve you very much in people in your life, okay? That can be loved ones and friends, but it's also going to be acquaintances, passing strangers, people who are in your life for a little while and then they're gone. Maybe they come back, maybe they never do. But what I want you to treat Neptune in Aries as is the voice of God, but the voice of God is going to be showing up as strange mouthpieces over the next 14 years, okay? You'll be amazed at what came out of the mouth of someone or something along those lines. But this isn't just you having realizations and revelations through conversation. Aries is a sign that I really liken to coach dad in astrology. It's a natural coach. And what I mean by a natural coach is that it helps people to improve themselves. It gets involved in someone like an athlete, maybe it's a kid athlete, maybe it's a professional athlete, but a coach is there and involved in helping you to become the best you that you can possibly be. And so this is a dimension that is probably already part of your life, but I see increasing over the next 14 years during the period of time that Neptune is moving through Aries, where you are coaching people and where people are coaching you back. Now, it's not like, I'm going to coach you through this. Now it's your time to coach. It's not that. It's the most beautiful aspect of teaching. The most beautiful aspect to teaching for me is more than just, teaching someone and watching the light bulb go off over their head, like they finally get it and realize it. That's a great moment. But the wonderful richness of the experience of teaching is being taught by the people that you're teaching, learning from students, so that they're not really students in that exchange or conversation. They're your teachers. Maybe it's the way the person responds to how you coach them. Maybe it's like, oh, that's a great idea. What about this? Or, maybe the person responds with, oh, that made me think of this. Or maybe the person responds with something that has nothing to do with what you coach them, but it's very revealing or enlightening, or it does something for you. So it's in these one-on-one interactions, again, with people in your life, but a lot with people who are passing in and out of your life, that I see you evolving as a person. You will coach and be coached in the same moment. So you can almost think of your day-to-day life over the next 14 years as being a learning lab, okay, where you're learning how to teach and you're learning how to learn. Aquarius doesn't always feel like it makes a personal difference, or even if you do make a personal difference, you're reluctant to own it. During this period of time, you're going to feel that you're making a personal difference, and that person is making a personal difference in your own life. And it's going to be a sensation. It's not going to be cerebral. It's going to be a real sensation, something that really excites you, something that really invigorates you, and something that gets you wanting to participate even more. There's a coming to life, in your exchanges with people. There's a personal coming to life that's going to be taking place, but also a coming to life of your ideals and your concepts and the rules that you live by. You're not going to see them being proven right. What you're going to see them is coming to life in the lives of those people around you. And that is going to be a tremendously enriching and enlivening experience for you. If you're born under Pisces or you have Pisces rising, Neptune in Aries is going to be a wonderful experience. Now, for the past, number of years, since 2012, when Neptune entered your own zodiac sign, Neptune was in your sign, a sign that it co-rules with Jupiter, by the way, and it was working its magic on you, okay? And so it was illuminating who you are, and you were having a very powerful and a very profound Neptunian experience. That was also sort of doubling as a Piscean experience. And it might not always have been clear to separate the Neptune from the Pisces during this period of time since 2012, when Neptune entered your zodiac sign. Neptune has a lot to do with yearning. And Neptune has a lot to do with longing. And in fact, Neptune is the planet of yearning in astrology. And if you think of yearning, if you think of longing, it's about wanting something that's not present in your life, okay? You yearn for this, you long for this. There can be a quality of, I miss this. I had this once and it's gone. Or I want this in my life, but I never had it. So there's an absence. You long or yearn for something that is absent from your life and that you may never have, all right? So yearning and longing is different from craving or needing, like I'm really craving sweets right now, or I really need some caffeine. I'm going through a downward spiral in my late afternoon hours. Okay, those are needs and appetites that can be satisfied. But there's a longing, there's a yearning. What's built into that is never getting it. And sometimes this creates, a lot of times, this creates a great sadness and a great melancholy and a sorrow. And there are zodiac signs that just want nothing to do with that. I mean, that sounds like a bummer or heavy or difficult, or what's the point of wanting something you can't have, Not all zodiac signs get that. As a Pisces, you get it. Not only do you get it, but you even revel in it, okay? You celebrate it. You love that feeling of longing, yearning. It brings out this depth inside of you, and it makes you feel very alive. And it's also very romantic. The Romantics, who were very popular in the 18th century, they were all about longing and yearning for things they couldn't have. And again, it wasn't like, oh, I wish I could afford it one day. It was like, we can't have God be next to us, or we can't have the answer to a mystery. You long and yearn for things that are mysterious and ineffable. This is very Neptunian, and this is very Piscean, and this was very fused together for your last number of years. Now we have Neptune moving into the zodiac sign of Aries, which is very different from Pisces for a number of different reasons. First of all, Pisces comes at the end of the zodiac. So Pisces always carries with it the sense of things coming to an end or unwinding or about to end. And Aries is all about the starting gate. It's the beginning. It's the start of something. So Pisces at times can feel very old and very like it's unraveling and things have come to an end or close in their life. There's a sagacity that's associated to Pisces and a maturity and a profundity. Aries is associated to the spring equinox. It's the start of the zodiac. It's the start of the year. So Aries is about, let's get things up and going. It's the urgency of life asserting itself, all right? So as we move into spring, where things begin to bloom and to grow, there's a fight to get out, to take as much ground and soil as you can before the weeds and the late frosts show up, So there's an urgency that Aries is driven by. But Aries, being a fire sign, is also very here and now. It's very present tense. And here and now was a big phrase that we had when I was growing up in the 1970s. Okay. I remember nodding with great profundity. Someone would say, be here and now. And I'd be like, wow, yeah. be here and now, And it was, I think it came from a yoga book or something like that, that was written in the early 70s. But it was like, be here and now. Don't be attached to your expectations. Don't be invested in the way that you want to see things turn out. And as you can tell, we laughed a lot about this as well. I mean, it was very profound, but it was also like, oh God, that was so, like be here and now, experience the moment, type of thing. But as time has gone on and life has matured, that idea of be here and now, that idea of here and now, it's very Aries. Okay. Aries lives in an immediacy. Okay. I spoke to you just a little bit before about the urgency of Aries, but there's an immediacy to Aries. There's a present tenseness to Aries. It can almost be seen in a way as being so in the moment that that's the moment that Aries sees. Some of the other zodiac signs can start getting involved in the future. Where is this going? Where am I, is there a greater purpose to my life? They build castles in the air, things like that. Aries is like, let's get at it. They're just like in the moment. Let's get at it. Let's take this on now. We'll think about that when we get to that. This is a wonderful thing for a zodiac sign like yours. It's not going to change you. You're never going to leave behind your longing and yearning and your profundity. Okay. But it's going to get you to focus on two important words for you over the next 14 years. The first word is here, and here is where you are, right? That's here. Okay. And it's going to get you to focus on now. And now is the present moment. And what you're going to find added to this equation is the Aries energy of alertness, okay? That you're very alert in the here and now, that you're not going to be lulled by, what would it be if this happened, or alternative courses that you didn't take, or what could be, or what ifs, or anything like that. You're going to find yourself more and more caffeinated, for lack of a better way of putting it, okay? Like caffeine is going through you. You're going to find yourself much more alert, and you're going to find yourself making decisions based on here and now, based on where you are and in the present moment. And so what you're going to find as a Pisces, as Neptune becomes more present in the zodiac sign of Aries, is that there's going to be less longing and more being. All right. And as I said, it brings an alertness, it brings an immediacy, it brings, an in the moment quality, but it's also going to bring a lot of freedom for you. There's going to be less time spent investing in what could have been and more in being who you are right now. I mean, you're going to get some of audacity. Okay. You're going to get some of Aries's insistence. And it's not going to be like this feeling of like time is passing. I regret that. Oh, how sorrowful. It's like, I'm in time. I'm in the moment. Okay. And there's going to be less talking yourself out of things or waiting or all of that. It doesn't disappear. You're still Pisces. It becomes less dominant. Okay. It becomes less at the front of the field. And with this being in the moment comes spontaneity, comes a very different sense of being alive, and comes a wonderful freedom. And it's not a freedom that one experiences in abandonment. I'm abandoning myself and I'm free. It's not freedom of abandon, but it's freedom because you're realizing that this moment is your best moment. And because it's followed by another moment that's just as best as your best moment, you're living in your best moments. Okay. I think that that's what I'm really trying to say. And this is going to unfetter you. This is going to free you. And you'll have that sort of Aries athleticism, vigor, that having that kind of freedom brings, but you're also going to have profundity in a different way that you're used to experiencing it. It's going to be less meditative and more activated. it's going to be less reflective, and it's going to be more alert, you know? And these are the qualities that I see coming into your life. They don't replace what was there before. They don't take over things. They interact with your own watery energy. And I see this as really being very liberating and very free for you. Certainly free in you being who you are and taking joy in that. And I can absolutely see this leading to a wonderful, a very fulfilling, and even exhilarating next 14 years. If you enjoyed what you saw, please press the like button. It helps more than you know. If you could subscribe, that would be wonderful. I've had such a wonderful time visiting with you this week, and I can't wait to get together next time on Christopher Renstrom Astrology.